Initiation into Hermetics by Franz Barden. Magic Psychic Training 3. Before starting on the training for this step, the astral equipoise of the elements in the soul has to be established by introspection and self-control unless you wish to do mischief to yourself. If it is absolutely sure that none of the elements is prevailing, you ought to keep working on the refinement of the character in the course of the development, but you might as well go on to work with the elements in the astral body. The task of this step will be to acquire the basic qualities of the elements, producing and dissolving them in the body at will. We are already acquainted with the theory of the action of the elements. Let us deal with the practice. Fire. With its expansion and extendability in all directions, has the specific quality of heat and, therefore, is spherical. Let us then first of all acquire this quality and produce it at will in the body as well as in the soul. In body control, we choose an attitude allowing us to remain in a comfortable position, free of any disturbance. Indians call this position Asana. For the sake of better understanding, we shall also use this expression henceforth. Take in the Asana position and imagine yourself in the center of the fiery element which, in the shape of a ball, envelopes the whole universe. Imagine all around you, even the entire universe being fiery. Now inhale the fire element with your nose and, at the same time, with your whole body, pore breathing. Draw deep breaths regularly without pressing air or straining the lungs. The material and the astral body ought to resemble to an empty vessel into which the element is being inhaled. Better to say sucked in with each breath. The heat of the element has to be increased and pressed into the body with each breath. This heat ought to grow more and more intense with every breath. The heat and the expansion power must become stronger, the fiery pressure higher and higher. Until you feel yourself at last fiery, red hot. This whole process of inhaling the fiery element through the body is, of course, a purely imaginary occurrence and should be exercised with the utmost plastic imagination of the element. Start on 7 times inhaling the fire element and increase each exercise by 1 breath more. An average of 20 to 30 breaths will do. Only physically strong pupils of a great willpower are allowed to exceed this number at discretion. Use the string of beads or knots again to spare counting the breaths by moving 1 pearl or knot with each inhaling. In the beginning, the imaginary heat will be perceived psychically only, but with every repeated experiment, the heat will become physically as well as will become psychically as well as physically more perceptible. From a rise of temperature, outbreak of perspiration, it can actually increase to a fever. Once the scholar has managed to establish the balance of the elements in the soul, such an accumulation of elements in his body can do him no harm. Having finished the exercise of imaginary accumulation of the fiery element, you will, through imagination, feel the heat and the expansion of the fire. And now you may start on the exercise in the opposite succession, inhaling normally through the mouth and exhaling through it and through the whole body, pore breathing, the fiery element successively into the entire universe again. The number of breaths done when exhaling the element has to correspond exactly to those of inhaling the fiery element. For example, if you begin inhaling with 7 breaths, you also must exhale 7 breaths. This is very important because after finishing the exercise, the scholar should have the impression that not the smallest particle of this element has remained in him, and the sensation of heat produced in him must disappear again. Therefore, it is advisable to use the string of pearls or knots for breathing in, as well as for breathing out. Do the exercises with eyes closed at first, and then with eyes open. The Tibet explorer and traveller Alexandra David Neal describes in her books a similar experiment, pretending it to be practiced by the lamas under the name of Tumo, which is, however, very imperfect for practical purposes, chiefly for Europeans, and not at all suitable for any student of magic. In the Orient, there are adepts who perform this exercise called sadhana for years, and are able to condense the fire element to such a degree that they walk about naked and bare feet even in the coldest season without being affected by the cold. They can, indeed, dry wet towels which they are wrapping around their bodies in no time. By accumulating the fire element, they affect even their environs, which directly means the surrounding nature as well, so that they succeed in melting snow and ice not only around themselves but at a distance of kilometers. Such and similar phenomena can be produced by a European also, if he can afford the necessary time for it. For our progress in magic, we need, however, master not only one, but all the elements, a fact which is absolutely correct from the magic standpoint. So much for this. Let us pass now to the exercises concerning the airy element. What has been said about the fiery element applies in the same way to the airy element, but for the fact that a different imagination of the senses has to be considered. Take up the same comfortable position. Close your eyes and imagine yourself to be in the middle of the mass of air which is filling the whole universe. You must not perceive anything of your surroundings, and nothing should exist for you but the air-filled space embracing the whole universe. You are inhaling the aerial element in your empty vessel of the soul and the material body through the whole body breathing, with the lungs and the pores. Every breath is filling the whole body to an increasing extent and with more air. You have got to hold fast the imagination of your body being filled with each breath, with air, in such a way that it resembles to a balloon. Combine it at the same time with the imagination that your body is becoming constantly lighter, as light as air itself. The sensation of lightness should be so intense that finally you do not feel your body at all. In the same way you did begin with the fiery element, start now also with 7 times inhaling and exhaling. This exercise done, you should again have the positive feeling that not the smallest particle of the air element has remained in your body, and consequently you should feel in the same normal condition as before. To avoid any counting, take the string of beads again. Increase the number of breaths, inspiration and expiration, from one exercise to the next, but do not overstep the number of 40. By constant practice of this experiment, adepts will succeed in producing phenomena of levitation, such as walking on the surface of the water, floating in the air, displacement of the body, and many more, especially if one concentrates on a single element only. But a magician is not satisfied by one-sided phenomena, because this would not agree with his aims. He wants to penetrate far deeper into the cognition and the mastery and achieve more. Now follows The description of the practice concerning the water element. Take up your position you are accustomed to by now. Close your eyes and forget all around you. Imagine the whole universe is like an enormous ocean and you happen to be in the center of it. Through each whole body breath, your body is filled with this element. You should feel the cold of the water in your whole body. If you have filled up your body with this element completely by inhaling 7 times, breathe out equally 7 times again. With each breathing out, you withdraw the water element from your body so that not the smallest particle will remain in it at the last exhaling. Here again, the string of beads may be a great help for you. With each new exercise, take 1 more breath. The oftener you will practice this exercise, the more distinctly you will feel the cold properties of the water element. You ought to feel, as it were, like a lump of ice. Each of the exercises should not extend over more than 20 minutes. As time goes on, you ought to be able to keep your body as cold as ice, even in the hottest summertime. Oriental adepts master this element in such a degree that they can perform the most astonishing phenomena straight away. For example, they produce rain during the hot or dry season and stop it again at will. They can ban thunderstorms, calm down the roaring ocean, control all the animals below the water, and so on. Such and similar phenomena are no miracles for a real magician who understands them perfectly. All that is left to me to describe the last element, say that of the earth. Take up your routine position as you did before. This time, imagine the whole universe being the earth with yourself sitting in the middle of it. But do not imagine the earth as a lump of clay, but being a dense, earthy material. The specific property of this earthy material is density and gravity. Now you ought to fill your body with this heavy material. Begin again with 7 breaths and increase 1 breath more with each new exercise. You must manage to concentrate so much of the earthy material into yourself that your body seems as heavy as a lump of lead and almost paralyzed by the weight. Breathing out happens in the same way as it did with the other elements. At the end of this exercise, you ought to feel as normal as before the beginning. During this exercise is also the duration of this exercise is also limited to 20 minutes at the utmost. This sadhana exercise is practiced by a great deal of Tibetan lamas, mostly in such a way that they begin meditating on a lump of clay, dissecting it and going on to meditate again on it. The genuine magician knows better how to approach this element in a much simpler way and master it without the help of such a difficult meditation procedure. The colour of the different elements may serve as a useful resort to imagination. As far as fire is red, the air blue, water is greenish blue, and the earth yellow, grey or black. Colour vision or sensation is quite individual, but not absolutely necessary. Anyone believing it to favour his work may make use of it in the beginning. What chiefly matters in our exercises is the sensory imagination. After a longer spell of exercises, everybody should be able, for example, to produce heat with the fire element in such a degree that it can be demonstrated with a thermometer as a fever heat. The preliminary exercise of element mastery is irremissible and needs to be given the utmost attention. Manifold is the kind of phenomena an adept can produce, say, in controlling the earth element, and it is left to everybody to meditate on this problem for himself. Mastery of the elements is the darkest chapter of magic about which very little has been said up to date, because the greatest arcanum is hidden in it. At the same time, it is, however, the most important magical domain, and he who does not possess the elements will scarcely get on in magic science.